Deep in the heart of the Canadian wild, where the mountains rise like ancient sentinels and the forests stretch endlessly, a quiet tradition endures. Here, mountain men live by the rhythm of the land, reading the signs, respecting the seasons. For them, food isn't always bought, it's found. Scattered across the landscape are nature's hidden gifts: wild berries, earthy mushrooms, roots and greens known only to the trained eye. But for the mountain man, it's not just about sustenance, it's about connection. This is the way of the forager. In this episode, we will cover foraging for food and fun. While foraging can be a rewarding activity, it can also be dangerous, even deadly, if proper precautions are not taken. Many wild plants and mushrooms are toxic or fatal if consumed. Some poisonous species look nearly identical to edible ones.
I stopped to check out this burn from last fall I had witnessed. Usually the next spring, these burns will have morels popping up. Unfortunately, it was a little too dry, and I only found 3 or 4 that were about this size. Leave them or pick them? If not enough for a fresh meal, you can always dry them for later use.
After a wildfire sweeps through the forest, something remarkable often follows: the emergence of fire morel mushrooms. In the blackened soil of last season's burn, these elusive fungi rise like whispers of new life. Charcoal gray to golden brown, they blend into the ashen forest floor, their honeycomb caps camouflaged among the debris. Foragers know where to look: south-facing slopes warmed by spring sun, near standing dead trees, especially firs and pines, areas where the fire was hot but not total, places where enough organic matter remains to nourish the soil. Spotting one often means more are nearby. Patience and a sharp eye are essential, and the reward, unmistakable. Fire morels are prized not just for their rarity, but for their flavor: earthy, smoky, and rich, a taste that tells the story of the forest's rebirth. Sautéed in butter or added to a simple dish, they're a delicacy born from ash and resilience.
After you've harvested your morels, what do? Of course, you eat fresh, but you might want to save some for later. These have been dried on a rack until they were totally dry and then sealed in a jar. They'll last a long time and are easily portable. Another option is parboiling them for 2 to 3 minutes in boiling water, then placing them on a cookie sheet in a single layer and freeze overnight. Once they're frozen, you can store them in freezer bags. Which approach is better? I don't know. I would say these frozen ones have more of the original fleshiness because they haven't been totally dried. But with the dried ones, you just rehydrate with water, and these mushrooms are really good to add to soup or other dishes. Drying is good. We also dried some pepper for later use. Drying is a great way to prep foods for later meals.
When you venture forth on your foraging excursions, you never know what you might run into. Take that moment and enjoy nature and what it provides, whether it be a unique encounter or finding edible food in your yard or wilderness. Mother Nature will provide if you know where to look.
These are some really edible tiny babies. Does anybody know what any of this is?
No, I don't.
All I know is I was told by my grandparents to pull them out of the garden.
Exactly. Okay, so do you know why? Because every food that we grow in the garden as colonial settlers is a food that came from Europe. That's what it is. It's a food that we brought seeds to North America, and we tilled the soil and we put the seeds in, and then anything that wasn't those plants that we were familiar with and knew to be food, we yanked it out and called it poison and put it in the compost. Or, maybe we fed it to our animals, but mostly we didn't. We got really afraid of those because we didn't know what they were.
Yeah.
And the truth is, this continent has thousands of foods that spring up out of the ground every year. These are our indigenous foods. Some of them may be settler colonial. Some of them are likely mixes. between a species that is a colonial species and a species that is an indigenous species. So this continent has had a different people every 100 kilometers for the last 10,000 years. Just the way that Europe has a different people and a different language and a different food system every 100 kilometers, just the same as China does, just the same as Africa does, just the same as India does. But as colonial settlers, that means those of us who went off of adventuring in the world from Europe, mostly Dutch or English or French or Spanish, we went around the world and we assumed that wherever we landed, that was what was there, and it went across the entire landmass. But these little guys here, these are all different types of mustard, actually. So mustard is one of our biggest food plants on the planet. I know those are all mustard because I've studied plants for decades and because I know how to recognize a mustard, but also because I've been on this plot of land for 18 years. So every one of those plants, I've watched them come up as a teeny tiny little plant or cotyledon even. And then I've watched it grow until it makes flowers and seeds and dies.
And then what are those?
These ones are lamb's quarter, some people call them. The indigenous people call it goosefoot. Goosefoot is very indigenous to this continent. It is one of the 4 most primary food plants on this continent. And botanists will argue about which species of goosefoot is from here and which species of goosefoot is from Europe. But just like me and most of the other people on this continent, a lot of us are mixed. And I suspect the goosefoot is also mixed. So these guys, they come up all over the garden all the time. And from this time when they're teeny tiny, we eat them raw in salad. They're a really nice sort of spinach that comes out of our ecosystem. But then as they get bigger, we'll cook them because they get a little bit thicker. And then in the fall, we'll harvest the little florets on them that are like a broccoli and cook those. And that's before the seed, becomes ripe. And you can also harvest the seed. The biggest thing that I've learned in doing this wild food is that humans are not meant to eat grain. If we were in the wild forest, we would only eat grain if we were starving. It takes so much work to harvest grain. It takes so many hours, and there is only grain at the end of fall going into winter. So when we were starving in the winter, we would probably run around the planet finding grain and seeds that were still on stalks, and we would spend our winter time shaking them out. But that is not the thing that we would be eating 5 times a day like we do now. And I think that's a big part of what's making us sick as humans, is we are 98% primate, 99% primate, pretty close. And we eat a diet that is more like what a bird would eat than what a primate would eat. And when we start putting our diet back more like a primate would eat, we get a lot more health in the human body.
Yeah, that's true.
Canadian mountain men know that year-round, nature offers her quiet generosity to those who know what to seek. Come summer, the feast spreads. You'll find fireweed, its young shoots edible, its flowers making jelly with a color so vivid it feels like eating July itself. Spruce tips, young and bright green, carry citrusy notes and are rich in vitamin C. Delicious raw, brewed into tea or dried as seasoning. Berries are everywhere. Raspberries, strawberries, wild blueberries in sun-dappled clearings. It's all here, ripe for the picking.
In our area of BC, when September rolls around, it's time to head up to the top of the 5,000-foot mountains to harvest wild huckleberry and blueberries. That is, if the bears haven't beat you to it. A good indication of hotspots is based on the number of bear scat piles on the Forest Service Road. Remember to always keep your head on a swivel, because you never know when something might want to bury you in their tummy. Picking berries. Good ingenious way of doing it. Little lantern. put it here, that way you can use both hands. Yeah, these darker ones are the wild huckleberries. Wild blueberries here. Just as tasty, but a little different taste. These are not going into the bucket. These are going into the other hole.
Autumn is the season of roots and nuts. Burdock and wild carrot dig deep. Acorns, once leached of their bitterness, can be ground into flour. Choke cherries ripen into deep purple-black clusters, tart and potent, perfect for syrups or jams. Mushrooms, chanterelles, lobster mushrooms, boletes, if you know them well, offer savory meatiness from damp forest floors. Even in winter, nature doesn't abandon you. Rose hips cling to bare branches, full of vitamin C. Cedar and pine needles steep into teas that warm and heal. If you stored wisely in the fall, caching root vegetables, nuts, dried berries, your foraging doesn't stop with the snow. There's a quiet power in knowing that, even here in the cold reach of Canada, food grows wild and free. It just takes attention, patience, respect, and the willingness to eat what others overlook. Follow these safety tips. Never eat anything unless you're 100% sure it's safe. Use a reputable guidebook or go with an experienced forager. Teach children not to touch or eat wild plants or fungi. Avoid foraging near roads, industrial areas, or treated lawns due to pesticides. When in doubt, throw it out. If you suspect poisoning, call your local poison control center immediately or seek emergency medical attention. Let's enjoy nature responsibly. Stay safe, stay smart, and forage with care. And now for the foraging fun. Mead is a simple wine that is made with honey instead of sugar. This dandelion mead recipe is easy to make and uses the abundance of foraged dandelions to make a delicious and highly drinkable beverage. First, gather your dandelions from a clean source. Then start the laborious job of separating the yellow flowers from the stem while avoiding the green ones that would make the mead bitter. Sanitize everything that will be used in the brewing process. Put 1/2 gallon of non-chlorinated water and the dandelion petals in a pot and bring to a boil. Turn off the heat and let steep for 15 to 20 minutes. Add the honey and stir to dissolve. Then add the juice of the lemon and carefully pour the honey water mixture into the jug using a funnel. Top off the jug with cold non-chlorinated water, leaving at least 2 inches of headspace on top. Put the lid on the jug and gently mix everything around a bit. Make sure that the temperature of the must is below 90 degrees Fahrenheit, then add 1/2 packet of champagne yeast. Put the lid back on tightly and this time shake the jug for a minute or two to distribute the yeast. Put a little water in the airlock to the line, then put the rubber stopper end into the jug. Put the jug in a dark place. It should start bubbling within 12 to 24 hours. After about 6 weeks of fermenting, or once the bubbling has completely stopped, the mead can be bottled and aged. One of the amazing things about mead is its versatility as a libation. You can drink it over ice, warmed up, or in a cocktail. It's even great at room temperature. However you consume it, just sit back and enjoy the bounty that Mother Nature provided.